If you're consistently getting lower back pain when you deadlift, you don't need more core exercises. You need a plan that addresses the cause and builds strength in the correct areas. Follow along for this step-by-step guide where I'm going to help you take your deadlift from pain to PRs. Most people will get pain in the deadlift when they go to do the initial pull. What this tells us is that they can't actually extend the hips effectively. Not being able to use the hips very well places excessive load through the lower back, stressing the joints and overusing the lower back muscles. So the first thing that we need to do is learn how to effectively extend at the hip rather than excessively relying on the lower back. Just a quick side note, if you're getting pain as you actually bend down towards the bar as opposed to when you initiate the pull, that's a slightly different issue. Go and watch my video on fixing flexion intolerant back pain and then come back and watch this one. The stuff in this video will still be super relevant to you, but there's just some things that you'll need to do to improve the flexion tolerance first before we can get started here. To get good extension through the hip, it means we want the glutes and the hamstrings to be doing the initial movement. For this to happen, first we must be able to lengthen them. In order to lengthen these muscles, we need to be able to anteriorly rotate the pelvis on a fixed femur. This will give us the stretch that we need in the hamstrings and the glutes to pre-tension them to allow them to activate effectively. So the first thing we can do to improve the lengthening capacity of the hamstrings and the glutes is some good old-fashioned stretching. So two of my favourite drills is this nice elevated glute stretch and as well just some simple leg tucks. So the leg tucks are just going to allow us to stretch the proximal portion of the hamstring. Now that we've freed up the muscles, we want to actually improve the ability of the pelvis to move around the femur. So a really simple drill we can do for this is some nice supine pelvic tilts. So this is going to teach the pelvis to move anteriorly on the femur. This is indicative of good hip flexion. To do your pelvic tilts, it's going to be a super minimal movement, all right? We're going to use a yoga block and we're going to place it between the knees and we're going to lie on our backs. So there's a couple of key points we need to be aware of here. When we do this, I want you to keep the ball of the foot, the ball of the big toe, ball of the little toe, and the heel directly on the floor. We're going to put a little bit of pressure into it, so not a lot, maybe like 10% just to engage. From here, we're going to do super slow movements of the pelvis. So I'm trying to rock my pelvis back, and then I'm going to rock it forward, all right? And this should be coming from the pelvis. So imagine there's a rod that goes through your hip bone, and we're just pivoting on that. What we don't want to see, and a common mistake in this movement, is driving with the rib cage and the lower back, as opposed to just gently rotating through the pelvis. It is a very minimal, very subtle movement, but it's a key movement that we need in order to progress our hip flexion and get a good deadlift hinge pattern. So now we're at the point where you've got some length into your hamstrings and your glutes, you've got a bit better control of the pelvis. Now we're actually going to look at how to coordinate hip extension. Very simply, we're going to set up with a foam roller against the wall and we're going to lie on our backs. We're going to have a slight bend on the knee and our heel is going to be on top of the roller and we're going to have our 3 points of contact on the floor. So we're going to have the ball of the big toe, ball of the little toe and the heel. That's going to be pushing in and we're going to push down into the foam roller, okay? So I'm pushing down, imagining I'm pushing off the floor, but we're not actually driving off just yet. The key thing in this movement is we're going to take the opposite leg and we're going to lift it up. Now this is very important because what that does, that rolls the pelvis back. Whenever we have the pelvis rolled back into posterior tilt, it means we can't extend the back quite as efficiently, which means we take away that compensation pattern that we're seeing in the deadlift, okay? So we're going to roll that into that posterior tilt and we're going to pull down into the foam roller. So I'm feeling some nice engagement through my hamstrings and through my glutes, but there's absolutely nothing happening in my low back, okay? And this is exactly what we want to be priming for a deadlift. So this is just teaching the muscles how to coordinate in the right manner for whenever we carry this over into a deadlift pattern. This is just going to be done isometrically. We're going to hold this position and just really feel the correct muscles firing in the correct sequence. Obviously, we're going to switch over and we're going to do both legs, and you might find one feels slightly different to the other, but we're just going to keep working through them. So once we feel confident with that movement, we're going to move into a vertical plane hip extension movement. So this is going to be a bit more challenging because obviously we're fighting against gravity, whereas on our backs, we've taken that out of it. So what we're going to do here, we're actually going to find hip extension by rounding out the lower back. So we take the lower back's ability out of the movement. So we are forced to find that hip extension. We're going to set up with a bent knee, and we're just going to let our upper back round down. So we're going to be super relaxed with this, okay? And I want to go down as far as I can. Now, an important note with this, when we do this hip ain't sitting down, knees bent, hip stays high, knee stays where it's at, and we're just rounding out the low back, okay? When we get to this position, we're really pushing hard through the inside of the foot, and I'm thinking about keeping that knee there, and I bring my hip forward, okay? So the movement's not lifting up, the movement is pushing forward. That's the difference in a good hip hinge and a poor hip hinge, is the ability to drive the hip forward, not lift the back up. So this, again, we push into the floor with the foot, knee bends, hip stays high, we round out the lower back. So I'm taking away my lower back's ability to kick in on this movement. I have to build the pressure through the foot, knee stays forward, and I'm really engaging my hip there. I can feel my glutes and upper hamstrings kicking on lovely, and we push forward. So once you've got super confident at finding your hip extension, we're going to actually do it with a straight back now, because obviously when we're deadlifting, we're not doing it with a really rounded back. So we want to be able to find that hip extension pattern with a straight back, or at least a neutral spine, without the lower back muscles overcompensating. For this one, we're literally just going to take a deadlift stance. So this time we're going to stand with our feet together. We're going to have a slight bend in the knees. I just want you to place your hands on the hips. Nice, tall spine, a little bit of tension on the abs, and you're going to push the hips back. So again, always thinking about pushing the hips back. We're not dropping down, we're not rounding forward. It's a nice slight bend in the knee, and the hips drive back. So from here, we're finding that nice hip hinge pattern without any weight, without any load, and it just allows us to get really, really comfortable at finding our body's ability to lengthen those hamstrings and lengthen the glutes, and you will feel them kicking on in this position. You'll feel like they want to engage. That's exactly what we want. So we're just going to use this movement, and we're going to practice our ability to go through some hinging. Now, one thing that I will stress before we move on to the loading patterns is that just finding these coordinations and the movement skills, you may need to spend a few weeks at this, okay? Depending on how long you've been experiencing your lower back pain, we want to get this right. It is worth investing the time in building the fundamentals in order to progress in the long term. So don't rush the process, get really good at this. It will pay dividends in the long term. Now that we're super competent with our hinge patterns, we're going to start adding some load. So before we dive straight into the actual deadlift patterns, we're going to just focus on a little bit more refinement of the hinge. I like to use two main movement patterns. So number one is a single leg wall hinge. To set this up, you can have two relatively light dumbbells for now. You're going to place one foot pushing into the wall. So this foot pushing into the wall creates some nice stability, allows us to lock the pelvis in place to prevent any rotations. In the lead leg, we're going to have a slight bend at the knee, and we're just really going to focus on, as per usual, pushing that hip back. So we're not dropping forward with the spine, we're pushing the hip towards the back wall, and we're just really finding the glute and the hinge. From there, we drive forward and back. So it's always back and forward. We're never thinking up and down with a hinge. It's back and forward. And we can just do this and really find that glute pattern. You'll feel it really loading, and you shouldn't be getting anything in the lower back. If you do start to feel the low back kick on, push this foot in a little bit harder, and you should feel it stabilize quite a bit. Now, a key thing we want to avoid whenever we do any sort of a hinge pattern like this, a common mistake is people will go into the hinge, they'll find a nice lovely hinge, and they'll chase depth rather than actually feeling it. So I can feel like my hips are maxed out here, but some people will just drop down and round at the lower back just to get more range. We're not chasing range here, we're chasing effective glute and proximal hamstring engagement. Another nice, safe way to really challenge the upper hamstrings and glute lengthening ability is to do a heel elevated straight leg RDL. Keep the knees as locked as we can. Stay nice and upright. And again, we're going to push our hips back. So we're always thinking about the hips going back, not up, back. And we're going to try and get some nice length through the hamstring, and we push forward to come up. So we're not thinking about lifting up with the lower back. Bit of tension in the abs. We're thinking of pushing the hips back. We get some lovely stretch in the upper hamstring and the glutes, and then we push forward. With this, we want to use relatively light weight to begin with. Think more about getting some good stretch on the hamstrings and loading them in this stretched position rather than massively loading this. There's plenty of time to load it through the actual deadlift itself. Now, at this point, you're really ready to start deadlifting again, all right? So whenever you go in, your technique should nearly feel completely different. You should feel like you can access your glutes, you can pull through your hamstrings, and you don't get much lower back engagement until the top portions of the lift. Don't fall into the trap whenever you do start deadlifting again, that you've got this new movement pattern and you're just gonna load it up as much as you can and try to hit some PRs. The big mistake that everybody makes when they go back to training the deadlift is they go too heavy too soon. Give yourself a good 6 to 8 week volume block where you allow to start building some load capacity of the tissue. We got to remember, you're using different muscle groups than you were previously. They need time to acclimatize to the new movement pattern and build the strength and capacity. If you do get back to deadlifting and you're still quite fearful of handling any load, a nice trick that you can do is start with pin pulls, and every 2 weeks gradually reduce one pin. This means you'll be able to hand load in safer positions and then gradually build down to a floor pull. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is you need to make sure you're taking care of the fundamentals. Okay, we can do all the movement and correct training protocols in the world, but if you aren't creating a good environment for your body to heal, you're really going to struggle to see progress. Focus on getting good sleep, eating right, staying hydrated, and managing your stress so your body has the capabilities to adapt and perform the way it should. I hope you found this video helpful. If you're interested in overcoming injuries, maximizing your health, training at your best, then make sure you're subscribed to the page.